Today I'm going to be having a discussion with one of my dear friends, the incredible Maureen Theresa, who is a beautiful dancer doing various styles of Middle Eastern dance. She's also a dance scholar and anthropologist, and she's had a lot of her articles published. But today we're going to talk, well, Maureen's going to talk about the hidden hair stories and contributions of Black people in Middle Eastern dance. We will also look at exclusion and racism and unconscious bias, as well as other issues around these subjects. I think these are very important to highlight. I really can't think of anyone better to do this than Maureen. She's extremely learned and she's a beautiful soul as well. So, Maureen, could we start off with you explaining to people what unconscious bias is and why you think that it goes on, well, why it does go on in the Middle Eastern community, dance community, and how this is expressed?
I want to say thank you for that lovely introduction, and I will try my best to live up to your expectations. Okay, so basically, we need to go back to how race was constructed, which was developed around the 17th century. I believe it was a German philosopher. And then the story goes that he saw a picture of a Caucasian woman from the Caucasian mountains. And he said that she was so attractive, so beautiful. He loved her features. And he said that all people who look like her should be called Caucasian. And hence that was linking into white people. Although people in the Caucasian in mountains, etc., they are obviously going to be of European and Asian mix, which results in their features. So Caucasian is a misnomer, and the features that people have is down to genetics and also in the environment which you live in. So it has nothing to do with how they later portrayed it as, superiority in terms of intelligence, desirability, being of good character. So this German philosopher, his ideals were taken and formulated into the concept of race. There are 4 races. So you've got the white race, black race, yellow race, and I believe it was the red race, based on skin color. So it's it's very, very, very simplified, even though we all know human beings are one, Homo sapiens, and anything else, in terms of how we look, our hair, eye color, hair texture, etc., is down to the environment in which we are living in over time. And it has nothing to do with whether you're superior, inferior, or less than, because everybody learns culture. And culture is what motivates human beings. It's not as if we are instinctual and instinctive, like mammals, animals, but a lot of things that we do is learned. Therefore, we can learn racism just as we can unlearn racism. That's the basic point. And with this race theory, they used it, Europeans, well, the governments themselves used it to colonize other countries to extract wealth. I think the end game was probably to get wealth and resources, and then obviously trying to subjugate people, using Christianity or methods of politics, education, etc. That all came along with it. And the unconscious bias comes because you've got most European countries that you're talking about the 19th century, 18th century, people are very poor. There's you've got this horrendous system where, you've got the royalty at the top. They don't care about the ones at the bottom. So people are living in absolute poverty. The wealth doesn't actually get to the people. It's only in trickles, they give it, the people at top give a little bit, and then, so you've got the people at the top telling the people at the bottom, oh, you should be grateful for what you've got because there are people worse than you, and they've got darker skins and they have different religions. So you are superior to them. And it's a way of controlling people. And obviously over time, people start believing these lies and half truths about people. So So that's how the unconscious bias arises. It's set in language and way people see people. And if you look at maps, for example, you've got places like Africa, because as we know, Africa and South America, for example, are huge continents, but they are much reduced. If you compare it to the size of the UK, for example, if you look at the UK, it's a small island, but it seems bigger on sort of the old versions of the map, because that was perhaps to represent political power. The way the size of the country indicated political power, and other countries are reduced to maximize their own geographical size or greatness, etc. In that context. So that's how that explains
that. How do you think in the Middle Eastern community, this unconscious bias, the Middle Eastern dance community in Britain, I'll just stick with Britain because that's what we know and we've experienced. Can you give me some examples of how Black dancers are made to feel inferior, excluded, just less than?
I don't think it's so much inferior. I just think probably feeling they don't have that look. There's a famous, well, not famous, it's a very well discussed video, a vlog by Ahava, who's an American dancer, and she really pins it down because she says that because of Orientalism, I'm sure some of your listeners will know about Orientalism. It was a form of theorizing. It's coined by Edward Said because he was trying to sum up the whole movement in the 19th century, where a lot of painters from Europe went over to the Middle East, but instead of painting what they saw, they idealized it, and they created like white features, and they tried. Perhaps some of it was a form of pornography. I don't know, can't really say, but it really erased Middle Eastern people of color. So Ahava talks about how
objectified and
objectified, yeah, and it's more, it's the women in particular. But if you're talking about men, they were probably caricatured, stereotypes, etc., which feeds into the race theory. Ahava talks about very eloquently about how Black women or Black female dancers feel that their features are mocked, hair, body shape, facial features, hair texture. Oh, you don't look Middle Eastern, you don't look this, you don't look that, because Orientalism has crept in so much of the belly dance perception, of what a dancer should look like. And it's a false dichotomy, really, because Middle Eastern women they don't look like, Northern Europeans, for a start. They probably look more Mediterranean, or maybe some will look like me, for example.
Yeah. Well, you're right. When you go to the Middle East, you see a really unbelievably wide range of skin colours. In Tunisia, for example, people can be very pale or very dark, and they're all indigenous. So, yeah, I think Edward Said was right, because he portrayed a kind of ideal, which maybe is still relevant today. People are still unconsciously perceiving dancers in a particular way. But I from knowing you, you've really educated me on so many issues around these subjects, and I've learned a lot from you, especially one of our recent conversations where you was explaining the influence and the contributions of Black people in Iraq and other countries, Turkey as well, which seem to be kind of hidden, because I didn't know about them, and I kind of read about Middle Eastern dance a lot. But I didn't know about these groups, unfortunately. So it'd be great to celebrate them now and you to share their contributions to the dance form.
Okay. I think people have to understand as well, because of the proximity between Africa and Middle East. African people have been part of the Middle East for millennia. far longer than people can imagine. There's been arguments or theories that because people came out of Africa, the first people that migrated out of Africa would have looked, African, typically African in its wide diversity, and obviously over time, the genes change and people's bodies become attuned to the environment. So I really feel that Africa and Middle East are connected in that way. You've got the Red Sea, so perhaps in the past the Red Sea perhaps would have been a smaller sea, for example. So maybe it was easy to cross, perhaps through walking. I don't know, but it was there. So the African presence in the Middle East is it's established. And in terms of people talk about slavery, Arab slavery. Lots of other ethnicities were also enslaved. But I think the fact that African people have been there, they would have obviously influenced, some of the languages, maybe, in terms of food, and also things like education, philosophy, all those things as well, which on the higher level, not just on the sort of smaller levels, but on the higher level. And one of the most famous I think, I believe that he was of African descent. I think it was of Bantu origin, Ziryab. And Ziryab was born in Baghdad, but he was enslaved as a boy. And he became a very, very good musician. He was so famous. In fact, he was so famous. I think he incurred the jealousy of somebody higher up. I think it might have been one of the sultans, or maybe one of the sultans' politicians. I don't know. And he was banished, and he went to Spain. We're talking about Al-Andalus when it was ruled by the Moors, and he became such a pioneer in terms of music, also in terms of fashions as well. The concept of changing your clothes according to the seasons came from him, and I believed he also developed the concept of a four-course meal as well.
Maureen, what's his name again? Because I want to.
Ziryab.
He sounds
Ziryab.
incredible.
Yeah.
How do you spell that?
Ziryab. So it's ZIRYAB.
Yeah.
YAB.
I'm gonna research him. He sounds
Yeah,
amazing.
Ziryab, that means blackbird. So a lot of people would argue, well, why was he called that? Well, it's quite clear that blackbird, as in black skin, and bird as a singer, because he could sing. He was, he was a fabulous musician, and he's a pioneer. The whole thing, things I'm talking about in terms of music. He had 10 children, and they all were musicians, and they all established schools, musical schools. So it's Spain has his legacy, and I imagine things like flamenco, whatever, and those all the other genres and things like that within flamenco have been influenced by the musicality of Ziryab, and he was well respected. So he's one case, but his name should be known more because he is really important. But the fact was he had to, he left Spain. But he was asking anyone, who will hire me, and Spain said, well, we'll hire you, we'll have you, and so he was able to work in Spain. So he's one example. You've also got somebody like Islam. You've got somebody called Bilal, who's one of the first. So we call the person who calls the call to give the call to prayer. He was one of the Prophet's best friends. Now he was, I think he was of Ethiopian descent or Sudanese descent. He was persecuted because of his skin color, and also because he was Muslim and he wouldn't renounce his faith. But again, this concept of colorism, there shouldn't be any colorism at all, because he's given full respect in the Muslim religion. So he's another example.
Sudanese people are good dancers. Sudanese women, I've seen them in parties with Sudanese people, and they do dances very like belly dance thing. but they have like a sort of their own version of it. But Sudanese dance isn't something I've ever seen anyone giving workshops on or anything like that. I'd like to know more about it.
Yeah. Did you see? I don't know if you went to Zara's Hafla. I think it was.
I went
Is
to
it
the
Jan?
I went to the last one.
There was one before that. They had two
Good.
Sudanese dancers on.
Oh, did
They were
they?
incredible. They
Oh,
were.
wow.
They did. They were so
It's
amazing.
gorgeous, isn't it? Oh, that's
It just
great
goes back to what
because
you were saying.
the first time I'm good on Zara for being so inclusive and
Hmm.
providing people with interest
Exactly.
in Indigenous dance like this. It's just because where I live and the things that I do with dancers, I meet a lot of different communities, and I've met a few Sudanese people, and they're just great. And they also do a dance like the Zar. Apparently, they do like a group healing dance, which sounds very similar. There's a lovely lady I know, and she was saying, "Oh, you can come to Sudan with me, and we can go and go to one of these healing dance sessions," which of course would be absolutely incredible. Maybe one day I'll do that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah.
you tell me about a group of Black people in Iraq, which sounded really fascinating.
Yeah.
Are really invisible. I've never heard of them. Thank God I've got you as a friend thank God for
Thank
all
you.
of us that you're doing this really incredible research and illuminating people and actually framing it within unconscious bias, because that is the real problem, because most people don't think
Hmm.
consciously that they're racist. Um, I am a Jungian psychologist, and I always think that kind of like a lot of how we feel about others is projection of unresolved shadow issues and guilt and pain in the self, requiring a scapegoat. And that scapegoat could be someone Jewish, someone black,
Hmm.
someone working class,
Exactly. Yes.
woman, a gay person. But I do think, that's what's really behind it is unevolved people who haven't looked at themselves.
Hmm. Yeah.
But
Yes.
I
I
think
think. Yeah.
even unconscious racism is massively um, detrimental and
Yeah.
unfair to opportunities for Black dancers, because people don't really think about it. This is why it was really important to have this discussion on my channel, because it's like really unfair, and I've realised it myself, and I've certainly, that realisation has been deepened by discussions with you. So tell
Yeah.
us about these guys in Iraq. They sound really interesting.
Well, one of the best people I learned from is Asala Ibrahim, because I think she brought it to light, the whole significance. Azala Ibrahim is a dancer of Iraqi descent, and she currently lives in Switzerland. She's an amazing teacher and a dancer, and she really talks about rights for the Kalia, the Iraqi Romani, again
Yeah,
are also marginalized,
yeah,
and the Afro Iraqis. And she talks about how they were taken over. Most of them were from the East Coast of Africa, from their home place to Iraq as slaves in the past. They were talking about, I don't know, maybe 8th century, 6th century, 7th, 8th century BC, before Common Era. And there was a big rebellion by one of the leaders called Zanj, Zanj. He led a huge slave rebellion against their masters, and I believe that's where they were all freed. But since then, although they've been there for that sort of length of time, they were never fully accepted, even though they didn't speak their African languages. They spoke Arabic, they were Muslim, they lived in Iraq, and they mostly are concentrated in Basra, in South Iraq. They weren't really accepted, but they have contributed massively to music and the arts. And Asala Ibrahim was teaching many of us some of the dance moves, and she explained everything about what life the sort of obstacles that they face, again based on the color of the skin. And she was saying that for example, there was one famous Iraqi actor who was married to an Iraqi woman, an Arab Iraqi, and they were just talking about skin color. There was scandal. Oh, he's a black man. He's married to an Arab Iraqi, and they've been there. They're not even, you're even talking about them in terms of them being African, even though they've been there, for so long. You're talking about 800, 900, even 1,000 years, and they're still regarded as outsiders. That's a shame. But she said, Asala was saying, they have contributed so much, and they are ignored, they're invisible, or if they're not invisible, they're discriminated against. So you will often find them in the lowest paid jobs, they're generally on the lower classes.
Would you say that, well, obviously, if they've been around for nearly 1,000 years, they must have made some contribution towards Iraqi dance, I imagine?
Yes, they have. She was saying they have done. As entertainers and as musicians, yes, they have. But that's probably as far as it goes, because she said they often accept their lot. They don't want to fight back, perhaps because it's they just feel it's too much of an obstacle. No, it's too big a challenge. But she said that many of them do look up to leaders, civil rights leaders in the West, and they see, when Obama was, for example, president, they saw that as a huge some source of inspiration. Perhaps things have changed for them now in terms of their consciousness, but it's difficult. You can't fight their battles. That they have to realize that it's just something they need to fight and want to change. So however you might say, you should think like this, you should be fighting, you should be standing up.
We don't know.
Consciousness.
Yeah, but I think discussions like this, and a lot of people are having them, not enough, obviously, but at least it's on the table for discussion. And, I believe that these things can fractal out and affect levels of oppression. I just want to ask you about the Zar, which is the healing ritual dance of Egypt. I read that the Zar literally means the visit, and some people interpret that as it coming from sub-Saharan Africa. What are your thoughts on that?
So are they saying coming? Oh, you mean the Zar is
the Zar ritual?
Well, yes, I believe it has come
from Africa.
Yeah, I think so. I think, because remember, again, this goes to this race theory. And this race theory also feeds into anthropology, because for a very long time, I mean, I don't know if you've seen this, but this idea that ancient Egyptians weren't African, they weren't black, they weren't of the culture, they were somehow mixed with Europeans, whatever Europeans they're talking about, I don't know, I'm not sure there. But this idea that the Zar, because I think in Islam, in sort of, talking about Orthodox Islam, Zar is frowned upon, because it's seen to be, I suppose, the same as Christianity, and Judaism.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be dancing or invoking spirits. But I think, again, it's how you see that, because there's
although it does get
and bad spirits, don't you?
Syncretized, doesn't it, with Islam? As does Sufism. They become like amalgams of indigenous paganism.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. Yeah,
and it has like the aspects of Islam. Probably like things have aspects, like voodoo has aspects of Catholicism.
Yes. And then, as we know, Christmas was originally a pagan festival, but it's been adopted, as mainstream Christianity.
This is why, like, Islamophobia or anti-paganism, or, all these things are so silly, because like everything sort of is, we were all pagans once, and lots of people still are. Our ancestors all kind of had the same religion, which is worshipping, the earth and natural processes. And for me, Middle Eastern dance is kind of all about that as a spiritual practice. It's about just feeling that connection. Sadly, though, I think where a dance is located culturally and economically, it will have a big impact on how it's viewed, and who's included in that group, and who isn't. Could you give me some examples? You don't have to obviously, name names or anything, but I know that you've got feedback, or you've read about other Black dancers' accounts of being excluded. Could you just like summarize that, with a couple of examples, so that people realize that this is a real thing, it does actually happen, and it's got to stop?
I just wanted to sort of add on a bit about the ZAR as well, because it's used. I know it's used extensively in lots of Middle Eastern countries. With if you're talking about women getting together, so if a woman is depressed, that she'll go into a ZAR. So it's used as a practical level. So it's incorporated in many groups, societies. So it has its uses. So even though it might be frowned upon, but
there's also a lot of similar things in sub-Saharan Africa as well, healing rituals as well. There's one I've seen videos of, I was told by a Pakistani person about it, and he actually he sent me some videos, and it was guys but doing the same sort of thing. It was similar rhythms, and it was mainly men. So I think men,
but if you think of Africa as the cradle of civilization, a lot of things that early humans did, things that we do, like language, for example, we speak. So our early ancestors, if they were, originated in Africa, that's where language would have come from.
Yeah, sure.
So if you're talking about rituals, that's a lot of the spirituality would have probably come from them.
Yeah.
And also, if you're talking about hunter-gatherers, they are, in terms of the way they live, they can navigate through the stars. Their perception of the environment is quite acute, because they've got to know who's behind them, where the danger is. So they probably rely on their intuition. So this is probably where it all comes from and where it's been honed. So we shouldn't be surprised. And also this division between sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa, I think that's got to stop, because at one time Africa didn't have that Saharan desert. It only became a Sahara because of the environment. It was hot.
Course.
Animals died. Because if you look at the rock
it's been like that for 1,000 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, if you look at the rock art, you will see people's drawings of animals, of peoples.
Yeah.
So that Sahara was a lush grassland or forest land at some point. And I think we should stop separating north from the south, because, again, the Amazigh people, they are African. They're not, maybe many have intermarried with Europeans. As you can see, some are light-skinned. You've got a lot of them who are dark-skinned as well. Hair texture, the facial features, you can see Africa in them. And when I speak to Algerians or Tunisians, many of them, most of them will say, we're African, we're proud to be African. We're not European, we're African. This is where we've always been.
That's the continent they live on, isn't it? It's Africa. Yeah. But I think people seem to sometimes think of, Tunisia and Egypt and that as being kind of Mediterranean. But
then, some of them might have Mediterranean ancestry. I'm not disputing that. But I'm saying, first and foremost, they live in Africa. They are African.
Yeah.
What else are they? And because, yes, we've had the Arab and Islam spread through North Africa, they're not Arabs, are they? Many don't speak Arabic. Arabic is not their first language. Their culture is Amazigh. It's African.
Getting back to dancing now, I can't really see. I don't really understand why people would have an issue with someone else's levels of melanin. If they're a good dancer and, they're a nice person, then it just blows my mind that in this day and age that...
Again, well, I think Harbour sums it up brilliantly. It's the unconscious bias. we are perceived, if you're black, you're perceived as being less, as in terms of being incompetent. It's not so much, I know people are judged by the way they look, your first appearance is last, don't they? You look at somebody first hand. But when you look at somebody, you see their facial features first, and you'll see the skin color, and that's what happens. You see that. But because of the race theory, or not even race theory, because people, again, it's not racism but prejudice, because every culture has prejudice. It's something, prejudge. So it's not something that's confined to race theory. People have their levels of prejudices, but I think with race theory, it's crystallized, isn't it? It's a system has been built on it.
Yeah.
So with this, you get the race bias. So people think, hang on, she doesn't quite fit the stereotype of what a person of her color should look like, or not look like, but should do. So bear in mind, and that West Africa, my ancestors would have probably come from West Africa or Central Africa. Bear in mind that in West Africa, Central Africa, Islam, Arabs would have traded, or the Jews would have been trading with these African people. So they would have had that link with the Middle East and Islam, or Judaism as well. So it's probably more of my culture than, say, somebody in Northern Europe, really.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So I was thinking that would be part of my heritage, because they would have spoken Arabic. They would have spoken Arabic in the mosque. They would have been practicing Muslim. All of that. So that's crazy. And also Spanish people and Italians. I mean, they've had the Moorish experience, and Greeks as well. They've probably got more in common with the Middle East than, say, Northern Europe.
I've seen a post from the gorgeous dancer Khadija, saying that someone had said no one wants to see you dance. And she said, when I'm excluded from the table, I build a bigger table and invite people to that. That was her response. I mean, I seen her at, like you did, at Zara's.
She's an amazing dancer.
She's so beautiful. She's so pure and gorgeous and authentic, and very, very, like you, very scholarly as well, very deep. I really, really enjoyed that performance. It was really professional and really beautiful.
Yeah.
I've seen on Facebook a couple of posts like that, and she just seems like she's so pretty as well. And it's nothing to do with it, but she's just looking as well. And I don't know, maybe people just jealous.
It's because she challenges their assumptions. Going back to your question about the examples, I think I've got friends. I've got one really beautiful mixed race friend. Now she looks quite European in features, but when she goes to the restaurants, she feels the vibes. Oh, what's she doing here? And her boss at the time, I think he was Middle Eastern, shame on him. He said, why don't you just put a wig on? I don't want to see your African hair. And that's a horrible thing to say, because because apparently the customers won't like it. Because according to him, the customers expect to see an Orientalist looking dancer.
But even like, if you look at the Orientalist paintings, though, I know a lot of them were, made to look more European, but some of them do have black dancers in them as well.
Yeah, because the painters were being authentic. You've got some great Orientalist painters, such as Etienne Dine. He's one of the best, because he lived in Algeria towards the end of his life, and then he became a Muslim. His paintings are, when I see his paintings, I can actually see a glimpse of what he was seeing. He paints the people as they are. He paints their daily life, with a lot of dignity. He's an exception, I would say. He's one of the few who I think he shouldn't really be called an Orientalist. I think he should be called probably of a different school, maybe the realist school, or I don't know. He was. I love looking at his paintings, because he gives a lot of humanity to his painters, to his subjects. But a lot of the others it's just fantasy built on racist assumptions.
What do you think about the gorgeous dancer of the past, Josephine Baker?
I love
So
Josephine
do I.
Baker.
She's so
I
gorgeous and
love
so
her.
fun.
But she faced a lot of racism. I mean, she was
She
mixed
did.
race,
Yeah.
and she had to leave to go to the US to France. When she came back, she saw things hadn't changed. You know, she went back. You know, it hadn't got any better. But they've got, you know, this issue of race and assumptions of what you are as a, you should know your place.
Did Josephine ever write about her experiences anywhere? Did she ever document?
I don't know. I haven't seen anything. She may well have done. It's something I should look at. But
This is a
she
bit
was
shallow. Didn't Josephine have a chihuahua?
she had a type was it a panther? She had a panther. And
Didn't
she
she have
had,
a little dog as well?
yeah, I didn't know about the dog, but she had a big, I remember she had a panther, and
Oh my
she had
God.
7 children of different, she adopted 7 children
She
from
adopted
different,
7 children.
yeah, 7 children, 7 or 8 children. She had a whole group of children from different races, ethnicities.
I'd do the same.
She was one of a kind, and somebody I really admire. They were talking about this again. It feeds in talking about race theory. This idea of black women as over sexualized. So this idea she had the banana dance, the banana dance, and she sort of I think Josephine was very clever. She was obviously very intelligent, and she knew what was going on, and she used to build on this idea. Okay, yeah, I'm a savage, and I'll have all these little bananas, so you think I am savage. But she was very intelligent, and as you know, she obviously was good because she could go to France, and you go to France, not any old body can stand there and sing and dance. She was pretty talented.
To even say that that's kind of insulting isn't, for me, and my perspective, especially being an environmentalist, I think the indigenous people the world over are much more mature.
Of course they are, but again, race theory.
Us lot who've ruined this fucking planet through ugly, horrible hierarchy, patriarchal, capitalist,
9 to 5.
This disconnect from nature.
Exactly.
These lovely people know a lot more than what we do, and if only they were making the decisions, we wouldn't be in this mess. And that whole attitude really needs to change a lot, because it doesn't serve us to cut ourselves off, and that's maybe some of the unconscious bias as well, as like that everybody's indoctrinated to be civilized, whatever that means, and feel shame when they're more connected to their pagan origins, which we all come from. Whatever our color, we're all we were all black once as well, where when we moved out of, the only reason people are white is because they moved further away from the equator, and vitamin D production means that people's skin lightened. That's all. That's all it is. It's just a response. But yeah, Josephine Baker, I'm glad we brought her up. She just makes me feel really good when I watch her perform. She's so gorgeous and so happy. But there are, now we mentioned Khalija before, but there are other black dancers on the scene right now. You mentioned the Sudanese dancers.
Oh, so it's 2 minutes. I've just spent 2 minutes. Oh no, yeah, you can come through. Yeah, come through. No, they can't. No.
Who is it? Is it your mum? Is it your dad?
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
It's all right.
Good. Okay, yeah. So what are you saying? Sorry.
There are black dancers out there, and the kind of movies I've been, remember years ago, I mean, you and I have known each other a long time, 20 years must be, but remember in them days there's the gorgeous Vashti. I think she still performs. I mean, she's mixed race, isn't she?
Yes.
And she was one of the stars in them days,
Yes.
who everyone we all looked up to.
Yeah, she's amazing.
She's
Yes.
amazing, yeah. She's so I just love her. She's dead like
Oh,
Dee.
she's so what's the word? She's very eloquent.
Flamboyant, yeah, and
Yeah, she's
quite
classy.
posh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, I
She's
love her. Yes.
gorgeous and fabulous dancer as well. Very
Yes.
inspiring.
She knows a lot. You know, she should be even higher than she is now. She should be
Yeah,
way up there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is she still doing any gigs? Does she still
I don't
gig?
know. I mean, obviously with the pandemic, she might not be dancing and stuff, but I don't know. But I hope she's still doing things. You know, she should. I hope she's doing things online. You know, teaching online. We could always email her, find
Yeah,
out.
we should. Do you think that it's possible with some, honest reflection for people to successfully look at their unconscious bias? Or say if someone is listening to this discussion, do you think that could help them to realize that, they do have maybe not, maybe racist is too strong a word for it, but it's kind of on that spectrum and not really know. Do you think that it's possible for people to be healed from this?
I think it applies to all human beings because I think all of us have biases and prejudices.
Yeah, we
I
do.
think the difference is when you don't realize. Like, for example, so there is prejudice everywhere. You know, human beings are prone to it. But the difference is when it's become institutionalized, so you don't even get the chance to examine what you're feeling. So, for example, you've got a family of white people and their son or daughter chooses to have a black partner. Now, you may get some people horrified. You need to ask yourself, why are you horrified?
Yeah, yeah,
This person's a human being. Okay,
yeah,
different matter if this person was a drug dealer or somebody
yeah,
who's been in out of prison, somebody's a rapist or murderer, but why this sudden horror?
yeah.
It's not even as if it's cultural differences because people have married across cultural lines for millennia. It's nothing new.
Well, they've actually found a school. It was Iron Age. It was really old. Yeah, I think it was Iron Age, and it was a princess or something like that. And she was mixed race, so people have been, mixing and having children, since then and probably before.
But the difference is there wasn't this concept of race.
No, no,
Perhaps prejudice,
yeah.
but not the concept of race. Race
Well,
did not exist as a
maybe not,
concept.
maybe not
Sorry.
even prejudice. Though maybe people just, that's the way. Like some people have green eye. Maybe it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
anything like what it is.
Yeah, because I think like for
Because
example, if you take
there wasn't a capital really. It was. I think it's related to slavery and feudalism and capitalism, where there needs to be a workforce that work as cheap,
yeah,
in
yes,
slavery for nothing.
yes.
And I think it's all related to the economic system.
And going back to what you said about the concept of race in the early times, that didn't exist. But what they did, they used, for example, in the Roman Empire, they used bread and circuses. So that stopped people questioning the government or the politics or the emperor. So they didn't get in too much of a fight. But when you've got, say, for example, where Christians were minorities, they were persecuted because that again, it
Yeah,
destabilized
yeah,
the head of state. And then when it became a formalized religion, they then looked at the Jews as minorities. You're challenging our authority, so they were persecuted. And this is where
Maureen,
you get
you're,
anti-Semitism.
you're so knowledgeable. My real hope for you is that you write a book on the subject, because
Oh, I don't know.
you've been putting research together for so long, and I hope we can have another public discussion like this, because I know you and I, for years, I've shared a lot of conversations like this, and I always really value our time together, and I'm really glad that we could share some of these ideas with with people. But yeah, we definitely need to do this again, because
yes, we do. Yes, we
because
do.
I just feel so happy and good about myself when I'm with you.
And don't me too. Yeah.
You are a light in this world.
Oh, thank you for that, and thank you for
everyone
doing
check out Maureen's dancing as well. She's incredible. She's a beautiful, very authentic, gorgeous dancer.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. I'm just like, yeah, I feel really good now. I feel educated as well. I feel good that we've shared this time.
Well, thank you for sharing as well. I learned a lot from you as well, what you were saying about different concepts and history. Yeah, thank you. It works both ways.
All right, good. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, love. Bye.